Good morning, everyone. How's it going today? Today, we're going to be taking a look at an introduction to agents from scratch. So we're going to be building an agent with only calls to the language model. We're not going to be using any of the already existing libraries for creating agents. So we're not going to be using LangChain or Llama Index or small agents, by the way, by Hugging Face. We're going to be building the whole thing ourselves. And the idea behind this is, of course, not to do something super robust, but to actually give you an idea of what's actually going on behind the scenes when you're using an agent. So think about this as an introduction to how agents actually think and how they work. So we're going to be taking a look at what is an agent, how tool calling works with language models, and then we're going to be building our own agent with just very straightforward LLM calls via our inference providers with Kimi K2 thinking, okay? So by the end of this video, you're going to have a working agent that works with a few lines of code right here, and you're going to be able to see how it's able to basically call functions, so executing tools and giving you answers based on those answers that it gets from those tools. And there you go. This is what this is going to be about. So let's get right into it. Okay, so let's start off with what is an agent. So it's very straightforward. Before agents arrived, we used to be able to use language model applications, kind of like what ChatGPT was back in the day in 2022, in which the interaction with an LLM application used to look pretty much like this. So you yourself, you would be here and you would send a query to your application, and the application was essentially just an interface to talk to the language model. And that was essentially all it did. The application used to just send the message to the language model and then bring it back to you. So basically, your query was exactly the same thing that arrived to the language model, and then the response from the language model was exactly the same as what you got yourself. And this worked amazingly. It kind of revolutionized the world. This is kind of how OpenAI's ChatGPT used to work in 2022. However, since then, we have changed the way that these applications work, and now they are capable of doing much more than just answering your questions with their pre-trained material. So right now, what happens is that language models are able to execute tools. And that is to say that they're able to solve tasks helped by tools that you connect to them, okay? And this is basically the definition of an agent. There are many different definitions of agents, to be fair, since this is a very new topic and a very new concept. But in general, you cannot really go wrong if you assume that an agent is an LLM application that's capable of executing tools. And in this new paradigm, it looks a little bit different in the sense that you yourself, you're still here. And let's say that you ask a question to your language model, okay? So let's say that you're like, hey, what is this document about, this PDF about, right? And the PDF is not in the pre-training material of your language model. So how is it going to know? Well, it's probably going to be able to use a tool that will query a database where there is information about this database, about this document, right? That would be RAG agent. Or let's suppose that you want your agent to, say, send an email. So it can execute a function called send email, and then it will get a success response from this tool. And then this agent is going to send you back the response saying, okay, I sent the email. Or it could use another tool that will get the news, and then it will be able to get you the latest news. And basically this gives the opportunity of your language models to interact with the real world and to not only rely on their data that's in their weights, that is in their pre-training material, okay? So that's essentially what an agent is. And in software, it is very straightforward in the sense that you yourself, you're here again, you send a query to your language model, and then you send, and then this, to your application or to your agent, and then this application is going to send that query to your language model, okay? So kind of the agent and the language model are kind of separated. And then that language model knows which tools it has available, right? So within your application, you have to decide which tools your agent is going to have. So if your agent is going to have these 3 tools, for example, you're going to have to tell your application about this, and then your LLM is going to know which tools it has available. I'm going to show you how this works in code in just a moment so that it's much more clear. But once you do that, your language model is going to be able to use those tools. So for example, I suppose that you send a query saying something like, what is the temperature in San Francisco? Then your application is going to execute that to the language model. And then the language model is going to return a tool call saying, selecting a tool titled get the temperature of a given city. And then you yourself in your application are going to execute the tool. So it's not the language model, it's not in the language model inference provider that the tool is going to be executed. It's going to be in your application, right? So in our case, it's going to be inside our actual notebook. Then we send back the result to the language model, and then we get back the answer from the language model. So the language model selected a tool, asked us to execute it, we executed it, we returned the result to the language model, and then it returned the final answer, which is what got to the final user right here. So this is how an agent is going to work, and this is exactly what we're going to be implementing in just a moment right here in our notebook, okay? So without any further ado, let's actually start coding this so that you see how easy it actually is. All right, so let's start this off, and in order to do this, we're going to have to, first of all, initialize our SDK, okay? So we're going to be using open source models. In this case, I want to use KimiK2 to actually do this. And in order to do this, you're going to have to go right here to models on Hugging Face, and you can click right here on text generation and click on the inference available filter to only see models that are available on inference providers. So right here, I can select whichever I want. Be sure to select one that has function calling capabilities. If it does not have this, it's not going to work. So KimiK2 Thinking does have it, so I'm just going to select this one. And before actually doing this, we're going to have to initialize our API keys. So let's just, first of all, install the Hugging Face Hub package that we're going to be using to actually call the inference providers. And then once that is done, we're going to have to get our API keys. So import OS and get pass to get my HF token. And then I'm just going to store it into an HF token variable like this. So I'm just going to go right here. Just going to click right here, go to access tokens. And from here, I'm just going to restart this one. And this is the one that I'm going to be using. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm just going to paste it right here. And there we go. So now we have my API key set up. Now I can just initialize my client like this. And this one right here is going to take a couple of parameters. The first one is going to be our API key, of course. So we're going to set it to HF token. And the model that we're going to be using, remember that we said that we wanted to use Kimi. So right here, I'm just going to click right here to copy it. Let's come back right here, select it, and there we go. So now I have initialized my client. And once that is done, I can essentially just start calling this client. So let's just call this language model with the list of messages. I'm going to tap into client.chat.completions.create. And I'm going to send the list of messages that I want to get a completion for. So in this case, I'm just sending one with the role of user. And remember, the role of user are the messages that you yourself as a user are going to send to the language model. And the language model is going to return a message with the role AI or assistant. And the content is, of course, the contents of your message. This one right here is taking probably a few seconds because it is a thinking model. So let's take a look at the response. If you want to, let's take a look at this right here. So you can see we have a bunch of different things. Let's explore actually what's inside of here. So we have the choices. Let's take a look at the message and the content right here. And this is the actual response. So it says, no, I am not sentient. I am an AI language model. Let's just actually print it to see it more clearly. It says, no, I am not sentient, and I am an AI language model. I process and generate text based on patterns and data. And there you go. Okay, very good. And you can actually take a look at its thinking tokens as well. So these are asks, are you sentient? So these are the thinking tokens. Okay, so this is what the language model started thinking. And here, so far, we are only in this paradigm. Okay, it is not executing any tools. It is just reasoning and sending back the response. And so here we have the response and the reasoning, and you can see that it does not have any tool calls. In order to see this, we're just going to go back right here to our response, and let's take a look at the message in dictionary form. And you can see that the role of the response is assistant, the content is what I showed you, the reasoning content is what I also showed you, and you can see right here that it has no tool calls, okay? So it just returned the reasoning and the content. Now let's take a look at how it would look, what it would look like with tool calls, and how we can use that to actually create an agent, okay? Okay, so now that we have understood how these reasoning models work and what's actually going on, we have successfully finished this part right here. Now let's actually create this part right here, which will have our language model decide which function it's going to call, and then we're going to call it and have the agent use the result from that function to give us a more complete answer. And in order to do this, it's very straightforward. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to have to create our tool or our function. And remember that the tools from agents are essentially just that, functions in any language that you're coding your agent. In this case, we're using Python. So my function, this is going to be my tool. Right here, I'm just creating a very quick mock function or mock tool that gets the temperature of any city. If it's San Francisco, it returns 72. If it's Paris, it returns 75. Tokyo, 73. Else, it returns 70. Very straightforward function. Just a very quick example of a tool. And what I want is that my agent uses this function right here. Now, keep in mind, of course, that you can do anything you want right here inside this tool. So you can call a weather API. If this was a function that, for example, writes an email, you can use the Gmail API. If this was a function that downloads something, for example, from YouTube, that you can do that right here. Anything that you can do in a function, you can have your agent do it with a tool. So right here that we have this tool right here, we're going to be able to just initialize our schema, because remember that in order to have our language model run a tool, we have to tell it which tools it has available. And to tell it which tools it has available, we're going to have to set a very arbitrary schema so that it understands very clearly. And the schemas look like this. You have to send alongside your call to the language model a schema that looks something like this. So you're going to have to define that it's a tool function. You're going to have to define the function right here with the name. In this case, it's get temperature, the description, which is this one, and this is very important as well, which is which parameters your tool or your function takes. In this case, as you saw, it takes the city parameter, which is a string, and the description of this parameter is the city to get the temperature for, and this is going to be very important. So very important that you actually add a description right here, because this will tell your language model what it has to enter exactly into each parameter of your tool. So the better your descriptions, the more accurate tool calls your agent is going to have. So in this case, I'm going to say add only the name of the city and not the actual state or country. And there we go. And then we have that the required part right here is the city. Okay, perfect. Now, this is kind of a long thing to write. So if you're actually building your tools, there are frameworks that allow you to do this much faster just with a quick decorator. I just wanted to show you what this looks like behind the scenes. And also, if you're doing this by hand, there is a better way or a faster way to do this, which is by using Pydantic. Pydantic, in case you're not familiar with it, it's just a data validation framework that is great for Python. And it allows you to create models or data classes that are very, very easy to create like this. You just inherit from base model and you initialize what your parameters are. In this case, I'm initializing the parameters for my get temperature function. The only parameter is city. I add right here also the type of this field. And then I use the field type right here to add a description, which is the same thing that I had right here. Actually, let me just add the full description like I did up here. Just going to copy this and just going to paste it right here. And there we go. And then once that is done, you're going to be able to generate the schema just like the one we had above but with much less clutter in this case, just getting the temperature and then getting the model JSON schema from this thing right here, okay? And then as you can see, the schema looks exactly the same as the one that we had up here. Very straightforward, okay? Now, next thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to send this to the language model. And we have this documentation right here. If you go to the website, you go to documentation and you go down here to Inference Providers, which is right here. And right here, you go to function calling. You're going to see exactly, pretty much basically what I have been showing you so far. And this is how you make a call to your language models and give them tools so that they can choose from them. You just add the tools parameters and the tool choice set to auto right here. And the tools right here have to be in this format that I just showed you. So let's actually do that. I'm just going to copy this right here from here. It's probably easier. Just going to copy this and paste it right here. I have already defined my model above, so I don't have to do this anymore. And right here, my messages, I'm going to define them like this. What's the weather in San Francisco? Let's say, what's the temperature in San Francisco today? The tools are going to be not my tools, but it's going to be my schema that I just created up here. And the tool choice, I'm going to set it to auto as well. So let's execute this and let's take a look at what it gives me. So the first thing that I want to show you is, of course, the response. We're going to show you the message and the content. You can see the content is empty, but there is some reasoning content because the agent thought in order to actually make a tool call, the user is asking what the current temperature in San Francisco. I have access to a function called getTemperature that I can retrieve the temperature for a given city. I should call this function with the San Francisco as a city parameter. And then we can take a look at the functions. So in order to take a look at the functions, we're going to select inside messages, the tool calls. Let me just show it to you in the dictionary form. As you can see, the arguments are city San Francisco. The name is getTemperature and the description is none for this one, but there you go, okay? Very straightforward. And this is essentially how our language model has effectively called a tool, but it didn't execute it itself. We have to execute it ourselves. So what's going to happen is what I showed you right here. So the user made a query to my application, and my application sent the query to the language model alongside the tools that it has available. The language model selected a tool, and then it is up to us to execute that tool and to send back the result to the agent so that we actually get the answer, okay? So this is how this is going to happen. Now, let's actually create this workflow. Let's create this agent that does the whole thing by itself. We're just going to send the query. It's going to forward it to the language model. If the language model returns a tool call, it's going to execute it, send back the result, and then get the result back to the user from the language model. And this is a pretty fun thing that we're going to do right now, an actual agent class. Very quickly, very straightforward, but very cool exercise. So let's do it right now. All right, so let's initialize our agent class. Very straightforward. As I was telling you, we're going to have three different methods right here. So we're going to have an init method when we initialize our agent. It's going to just give it the properties that it needs to actually run. We're going to have a call method because we want to just execute the agent and have it do whatever we want it to do. And we're going to have this execute method. It's going to be kind of a helper method that we're going to call from within the call method right here. Okay, so very straightforward. Now, the first thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to, let me show you, we're going to have to add a few things right here as parameters to our init method. So we're going to take a client, which is going to be an inference client from Hugging Face right here. We're going to take a system message, which by default is going to be empty. And we're going to take a list of tools, which are going to be objects like this one that I showed you right here. Okay. There we go. That's what we're going to be doing. And in order to initialize the whole thing, we're going to just initialize it right here like this. So we're going to set a property of client for this class, set to the client that we pass in. Same thing for the system prompt. The messages is going to be just an empty array, an empty list right here. The tools, same thing. If they are not passed any tools, then we won't have any tools. And then if we have a system message, we're going to append it to the list of messages. And this is very important. If you're new to LLM applications, the list of messages that you usually have in your LLM application is not necessarily the same as the list of messages that the user actually sees. And it's very straightforward to see this if you take a look at this sequence diagram that we were taking a look at before. Because take a look at this. You send a message to your application, which is a user message, and your application sent that message to the language model alongside the tools that it has available. Then the language model responded with the tool selection, then you execute it, and then you send back the tool result, and then the language model sent back a final answer, which is the one that gets to the user. Here you have actually 1, 2, 3, 4 messages, and the user actually only saw 2, so 1, 2. So these messages are going to be in our message list inside of our agent. I'm going to show you this exactly how it looks like in reality from within the agent. But just to be very clear, this list of messages are not necessarily the kind of list of messages, the history that you see in applications like ChatGPT, right? So this is even more. So it includes the tool calls and the tool responses. So there we go. And also, of course, the system message. So that is the init method. Now we're going to have to create a call method right here because we want to just execute the agent. And let's take a look at how this would work. All right, now it's time to create this call method right here, which is going to be very fun. The first thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to say what we're going to call it with. Well, very straightforward. We're going to call it with a message, okay? So afterwards, we want, once we have defined our agent, we want to be able to call it like this. So my agent, and we're going to be able to call it like this. What is the temperature in San Francisco? And it's going to be able to give me an answer like this, okay? So we're going to be able to call it like this. Now, of course, this does not work right now because we have not defined it yet, but this is the idea. And once we call it like that, we're going to have to, first of all, handle that message that comes in. So the first thing to do is to add that message to my history of messages, to this inner memory of my agent right here, okay? So if there is a message, we're going to append it to my list of messages. And then we're going to execute our agent with that message. So that's going to be, this execute function is going to do all of the heavy lifting. It's going to figure out if there are tool calls in my response from the language model. Well, first it's going to call the language model, then it's going to verify if there are any tool calls inside of that response. If there are tool calls, it's going to execute the tools, and then it's going to return the result to the language model until the language model gives me a final answer. And then this is what we're going to be saving right here, okay? And if we have a final answer, all we're going to do is we're going to store it back into our list of messages, which is our memory, again, remember, under the role of assistant. And that's essentially basically all. And then just for user experience, we're also going to return the assistant, the final message that my assistant gave me, okay? But that's very straightforward. Now the magic actually happens right here under execute. So let's actually initialize this execute method, which is the most fun one. So the first thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to create a loop that is going to continue until we have the final answer from our agent, okay? So while true, and then we're only going to break out of it if we have the answer. And the first thing to do is we're going to just call our model. And remember, I showed you exactly how to call a model with tools before. It's very straightforward. Oh, right, of course, here we have to have the self parameter right here. So first of all, we're going to call our model. So we're going to call it using the client that we initialized when we initialized this agent. And just like I showed you before, the messages are going to be all of the messages in my history. So every single time that we execute our agent is going to call the language model with all of the messages in my history. Then we're going to have the tools right here and the tool choice set to auto as I showed you before, okay? And then, very important, we have the response message, which is exactly what you see right here. So we're going to tap into the completion, choices, and then the message, just like we did above. And then once we have that, the first thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to verify if there are any tool calls. And I think this is actually how it's going to go. So if there are any tool calls in my message, the first thing that I want to do is I want to append that tool call to my history again, because remember that tool calls are also messages. And even though we're not going to be showing them to the user, it is quite important to add them to the history so that our agent knows when a tool was called, and so that it also knows what the tool response to that call is. Because we're not going to be able to send our agent the tool response if it does not have in the history the tool call. So tool responses only come after tool calls, otherwise you're going to have errors with your language model. And there you go. And then after that, we're going to initialize a very quick array right here called tool outputs, because very importantly, we're going to have, it is possible that we have multiple tool calls in a single LLM response. So if I had, for example, 10 different tools available and my agent decided to use 3 of them at the same time, it is completely plausible that I will get a tool calls array right here that has more than one tool call. So it's important to also loop through this tool calls array. Again, just as a reminder, what we're doing right here is quite low level for agents. Most of the agentic frameworks that we're going to be seeing later in the series do this behind the scenes, so you don't have to worry about this. But it's a very good starting point to understand what's actually going on behind the scenes, okay? So there you go. So the tool outputs are going to be starting off as an empty array, just like this. And then what we're going to do is we're going to loop through the whole thing, okay? Just like this. Like this. There we go. So first of all, I'm going to have to import JSON before I forget. Like that. Okay, so what happened right here? So for every single one of our tool calls that we got in our message, if there is only one, this is going to run only once. There is no problem. But if it happened more than once, we're going to have to do it here. So first, we're going to get the function name from our tool call. Remember that this is how you get the function name. I showed you exactly how this looks like in a tool call just above. And then the argument, same thing. We're going to load them from the arguments right here using JSON.loads. And now we have all that we need. And once that's done, we're going to execute it, okay? So first thing is, if the function name is in my functions that are currently defined in my Python program, I'm going to be able to execute it. So I'm going to do callable, the globals using functional name. So this basically just returns all of the functions that exist, and I'm going to call it I'm going to select the one with my function name. So here's my function to call. We execute it using the function arguments that we defined right here. So we destructure it and we just pass these arguments right here. And then we basically just get the output of it in simple string. And we just print that what actually happened. So we're executing this tool with this argument, and this was the output that we got. Very straightforward. If for some reason we get a very long output, if this was, for example, web search or Wikipedia search tool, we would not want to log the entire Wikipedia page right here. So only the first 500 characters is going to be more than enough. And then to tool outputs, we're going to append, first of all, the tool call ID, which is going to come right here inside of our tool call, the role, which is a tool, the name, which is going to be our function name, and the content. It's very, very important that you add the tool call ID and the role tool so that this actually works, okay? Because if you add a different ID that does not correspond to the tool call, so this one is going to be the response. So if you do not add this right here, and for example, you add a different ID that is different to the one that came in the tool call, and you send that to the language model, it's going to return an error. It has to have the same ID as the tool call, your tool response. So this right here is going to be part of your messages, okay? And then once that is done, once we have looped through the whole thing, we're going to just append all of our tool calls, all of our tool outputs into our messages. And seems like we have an issue right here. It's an indentation issue, I guess. There we go. Yeah. And that's what's going to happen. So all of this are going to be our messages that we're going to append to our history of messages. So if, for example, my LLM requested for 3 tool calls, we're going to execute those three tools, and we're going to return 3 different messages right here, and we're going to append them to our history so that our language model knows that those are the responses to the tools that it decided to ask. And then that's all that we're going to do. And then if or else rather. So else, if there are no tool calls, all that we're going to do is we're going to return just the basic content. Okay, so this is what happens if we have tool calls. If we don't have tool calls, we're just going to return the basic content. So just to go over it again and to make sure that everything is clear, we're looping through the whole thing. And we're essentially we're going to continue looping as long as we have tool calls to call. So we have this that runs up until we don't have any tools to call. And then once we don't have any tools to call, we just return the simple message response from the LLM right here. And that actually breaks us out from this, lets us break out of this while infinite loop that will loop until we find a message that does not have any tool calls. Okay. So that's essentially the entire agent. I hope that everything is clear. Feel free to ask any questions in the comments if you have any question. I tried to make this as straightforward as possible, but just again, I kind of stress this enough. Just remember that this is not the way to build agents in production. This is just to help you understand what an agent is actually doing behind the scenes. So it got the tools, executed them, added them to the messages, and then returned the final answer. So let's just execute this and let me show you how the agent actually works now. Okay, so now what we're going to want to get to is precisely this thing right here. So we're going to want to be able to just execute my agent like this. But before doing that, remember that we have to initialize it. And in order to initialize it, we're going to need a client, a system prompt, and a list of tools. Okay, now, first things first, let me just add some code right here. First things first, the client. So my client is going to be my inference client that I have already started to initialize right here. So it does not take an API key, it takes a token. My token is my HeyChef token, and I'm going to be using KimiK2 thinking like we did before. And then I also need a system prompt. My system prompt is going to be something like this. We're going to say something like, you are a helpful assistant that is capable of retrieving information about the temperature in a given city. That's going to give it enough context. There we go. And then once we have those two set up, remember that the tools are going to be an array of all the schemas that I defined before. So remember that my schema, just in case you forgot, let me just print it right here. Remember that my schema that I defined before, it is this one right here that contains the schema of my tool, that is get temperature tool. So this is what I need to create my agent. Now I can basically just, with all of this, I can just create my agent. I can just do agent equals my agent with client, system, and tools. We execute this, and now we should be able to actually run this final function that we wanted to run for a while. So what is the temperature in San Francisco? Let's take a look at this. And there we go. We see that it's executing the tool get temperature with the argument city San Francisco, and the output was 72. And then we're sending that back to the language model. So it says that current temperature in San Francisco is 72 Fahrenheit. And that's basically this log line right here that we have right here. So there you go. We have an agent that works, and that's perfect. And if you want to take a deeper look into what the agent did, we can take a look at the agent right here and take a look at the messages, for example. And you can see that we have quite a few messages. So first we have the system message, which is you're a helpful assistant capable of retrieving blah, blah, blah. This one, of course, for user experience, this is not the kind of message that you would display in the chat interface or in your voice interface. This is just something that is right there. So your LLM knows how it's supposed to behave. So your agent knows how it's supposed to behave. Then I have this message, which is what is the temperature in San Francisco, which is one that you would actually add. Then we have a few other messages. We have the tool calls right here. We have the final messages right here, which include the final get temperature tool call, which includes the answer of 72, and then the content, which is the current temperature in San Francisco is 72 Fahrenheit, which is great. So there we go. I can also take a look at the system message, which is another property. You are a helpful assistant that's capable of retrieving information. And there you go. That's basically what you need to know about agents. So we can also take a look at the client that we initialized before. You can see that it's my inference client with Kimi K2 thinking. And there you go. I hope that this was useful and that you understand a little bit better how agents work. Now, I cannot stress this enough. This is not how you would build agents in production. In production, you would have something much more robust than this. This is just a very straightforward example. There is not even error handling or anything like that. And there are frameworks that do that for you. So there is small agents, which is the actual, the framework that we have right here at Hugging Face, which is great. And I'm going to show you later in this course, in this series, how you can use it to abstract away a lot of what we did right here, but you will now understand better what it's actually doing behind the scenes, okay? So thank you very much. Let me know if you like this series, if you would like to see more advanced agentic topics with small agents and any other libraries. And yeah, let me know what you think about this video and the series. And thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.